Morning friends, Russell here coming to you from the shop. What we got in the docket today is I've got a BMW 5 Series with the N52 engine. Customer states it's running rough. We've run the codes on it and determined that we need to replace the Valvetronic Eccentric shaft sensor. If you remember a video I did in the past replacing the seal for this sensor on the valve cover, and I'll put a link to it up here, a little card link for that video. If you don't replace that seal, oil seeps up, gets in it, and destroys this sensor, and then it creates a huge mess. The fun part of doing this sensor is you have to remove the valve cover to do it. Yeah, it's just a pain in the butt. Never mind the fact that they've already had the valve cover off to have it resealed, which is never a good idea on these motors because the PCV system is integral to the valve cover. They've also got problems with that too. So the PCV has gone bad in this valve cover. Therefore, we have to replace the valve cover because it's integral, it can't be serviced. So we're gonna get started on it. This little bugger right here inside the valve train. And I'll kind of clip video in and out as we go. And we're gonna get started here. Now, as you can see, I've already peeled back all the wiring and opened it up over here. The more you remove back in here, the easier it's going to be to get this valve cover out. What we're replacing, besides the valve cover itself, is going to be this is the connector for the sensor where it comes through the valve cover. And like I said before, I did a video on this, the link card's at the beginning. So I spent about an hour getting all the electrical wiring out to get access, to include the fuel injector rail, to get access to the bolts for this valve cover. I don't know for sure, because I haven't done an N52 in a 5 Series. This panel's removable. I don't know if I need to remove it. I may go ahead and do that, and then we'll start taking everything out. As you can see, I've removed all the trim off the side, all the way across, and the full back panel piece. Fortunately, on the 5 Series install for this motor, you can do all that. You can get all that plastic trim panel piece off the backside, and it's going to give a whole lot more room to maneuver and negotiate the old valve cover out and the new valve cover in. On the 3 Series, the E90 chassis where this motor's installed, that back panel isn't a 3-piece on all of them, and even the ones that are, it's still very difficult to remove. It takes way more disassembly, so usually we just fight it out. In the 5 Series, we can get that back panel piece out relatively easily, and it's going to give a whole lot more room to get that valve cover in and out. So I'll pause the video right now and start. Well, actually, I'll just show it. So obviously, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the spark plugs and the spark plug tubes. You cannot salvage, well, you can 50% of the time salvage the tubes. Anytime you're doing this job, just go ahead and buy new tubes. They're cheap. So we'll get the spark plugs and the tubes out. I'll remove the Valvetronic motor. There's a procedure for doing that, and I'll show that procedure as I do it. And then, of course, it's take all the bolts out and remove the PCV line. Once all that's out, we'll be able to lift and remove this valve cover out. So I'm going to get started on removing the bolts and getting everything ready to take this Valvetronic motor off. Now, one of the first things we got to do, obviously, I haven't pulled the spark plugs and spark plug tubes yet. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the Valvetronic motor. And this, what the Valvetronic motor does is it adjusts the camshaft based on the readings coming from the Valvetronic sensor. Drives this motor, and there's three bolts that hold it in, and then there's a procedure for winding the motor a certain way. So, and the size of these bolts, it's a reverse Torx. I believe it's an Echo 8. on the sizing. So there's one capture bolt and it's tight in there. One capture bolt. And 2 bolts here. And so this would be the same procedure if all you needed to do was replace this seal. So the removal procedure for the wind out, it's once again a Torx bit, it's a T25. And in the back of this little motor is a Torx fitting. So the procedure to wind it out is to crank the motor all the way clockwise until you feel it give resistance. There it is. All right. So, as I remove the Valvetronic motor, it's the T25 in the end, clockwise all the way until it stops. And then as you remove the Valvetronic motor, it's kind of turn it counterclockwise as you come out and let it drive out. And then you leave it set. And as you can see, on the end of this, you've got a worm gear, and that's engaging a gear on the camshaft. And so what you've done is run it all the way out one direction, and then and I'm not going to turn it, but the T25 goes in it. And as you're backing it out, you're cranking it off the gear so that the motor stays set. Not as critical for me because I've got the computer capabilities to go in and reset the stops once this goes in, but it does make it a lot easier putting it in and out. I mentioned earlier about replacing the spark plug tubes. These little buggers right here, they slip down in the spark plug hole. Has a snap ring that holds it in place down there. These are supposedly to help heat sink and protect the coil packs, and I have found that over time the coil packs in these cars fail anyway from the heat. These are almost worthless. But the reason I always replace them is they get boogered up pretty bad trying to get them out. And actually on this car, not a single one of them came out reusable. So good thing I've ordered new ones, or I already have new ones on hand for this install. But honestly, why BMW? Why are we doing this? You're the only manufacturer that does this crap. Now, there's a special, really long, deep 10 millimeter that you've got to have for these BMWs to remove the ground stud. There's 2 of them in here. There's actually 3 10mm bolts through the center of the valve cover that have to come off. 2 of them require this long 10mm specialty tool. To get them off. Wow! They never, ever, ever come off that easy. Ever. Ever. And on a 3 Series, yeah, no. Wow. First time I've done one on a 5, pulled the valve cover, and once that back panel was out of the way, boom, came right out. Never works like that on a 3 Series. Never works like that on an X. Ever, ever. This is awesome. All right, we're gonna pause it for now because I'm gonna call it a day because I'm tired and hungry. We'll finish this up tomorrow. But I'll show you real quick. I'll zoom the camera in and show you the little booger that we're gonna have to replace. All right, that's it. That's what we're replacing. It's got three 10mm bolts on it that one of them you have to come through between the chains, and the other two you get from the top. They are captive nuts, so they shouldn't fall out. That's not to say that they won't fall out, but we'll just be real careful pulling that out. But yeah, I'm kind of calling it a day. We'll come back tomorrow and finish this job up. Wow. Never had one come out that easy. That's it. That's the shaft sensor. And so what happens is oil gets past up the seal and works down its way in here and just eats the sensor up. This car's got over 140,000 miles on it. Terrible engineering design, BMW. Just terrible. All right, as you can see, we've got the new Valvetronic eccentric shaft sensor installed, and I'm just finishing up putting in the new spark plugs. The next thing we'll do is we'll just take a rag We'll wipe off the surfaces and we'll place the new valve cover on. Towards the end of this video, I'll kind of give a quick discussion on why we always just replace the valve cover instead of doing the seals. Or I guess I can talk about it while I'm doing this. So, leaky valve covers on BMWs. Don't get me wrong, I think BMW builds a good motor. What they don't do well is gaskets and seals. They have a tendency to use fluorine rubber gaskets and seals, and these motors run very hot. So as they heat cycle over time, those seals and gaskets become brittle and hard, and then they'll start to leak oil. As far as when to do gaskets and seals on some of these motors, if it's a valve cover on an N52, I recommend leaving it until you're losing more than a quart of oil every 3,000 to 4,000 miles. Or it's created such a large vacuum leak you get a check engine light, or it's leaking so bad that it gets on the headers and catalytic converter and smokes up the interior cabin. Once you've reached that point, I'm always inclined to recommend to the customer we replace the cover, the whole cover. And that's because the PCV system, which goes into this hose here, is integral to the valve cover. It's not a serviceable part, it's part of the valve cover. So when it goes bad, a lot of times it overpressurizes the crankcase and pushes oil out the seal. And you can't service it. The only fix is to replace the whole cover. The other reason I always recommend just replacing the cover is about 50% of the time, not so much on the 5 because it came out real easy as y'all saw, but on the E90 and on the X series, it's so tight in here getting it out, we end up twisting it as we come out with it, and we crack them. As well as the seal for the Valvetronic motor and the seal for the Valvetronic shaft sensor need to be replaced. So in many cases it's just cheaper and safer to just replace the whole cover. And I could see right here where these boogers, instead of buying a new seal, skimmed a little RTV right here when they put it back together instead of putting a new seal on it. And that's no bueno. This is what happens when your customer decides to go cheap and take it to their guy. I know a guy. If you don't know, if he didn't spend 20 years working on airplanes and or isn't, BMW certified and tons of experience doing this, leave it to those of us that do know what we're doing. And I don't claim to be an expert because I'm not BMW certified. But I take the same approach on cars as I did on aircraft. Meticulous, meticulous, meticulous. Let's grab that valve cover and slip it on. Now this is always fun because you can see that thin rubber gasket, and it does not want to stay in its channel naturally. It wants to kind of flip out. So you have to make sure that it's lined up in there properly and that you don't pinch it putting it on. BMW says to just put it on as is. I've actually, on some difficult installs on an X series, pulled this gasket out and run a small bead of silicone, very small bead, just to secure the gasket. Not trying to seal it with silicone, but secure the gasket so it doesn't fall out when I'm working it on. And you can see these two ports right here. That's part of that PCB system. And a lot of times when we take these off on the difficult installs, the rearmost one will pop off in the head, and we'll just have to fish it out. That's also why we replace them. Oh my God, that was easy. I'm telling you guys, I've never had one go in this easy. All I'm doing now is feeling around to make sure that gasket didn't flip. And there's just no easy way to do it. It either works or it doesn't. So let's start running these in. And the beauty of a new valve cover is it comes with new bolts. So I'm going to run these down and then we'll torque them. I'll come back and show you all the finished product. All right, So the installation of the Valvetronic motor is reverse of the removal. You get your Torx bit, you put it in. You shouldn't have messed with this. You get it kind of lined up and started in the hole, and you're going to wind the motor into place as you go. All right. Then it gets the 2 bolts. Now with the plastic valve cover like this one, on this version of the N52, which is the later version, the torque on the valve cover bolts and on these bolts is 84 inch-pounds. I think it's like 7 foot-pounds or 9 newton meters or something like that. So we'll run these down, and then I'll get the torque wrench out. Then you got the capture bolt, which is always fun. All right, and that's it. That's all there is to it. A lot easier to do in the with an N52 in a 5 series because of the size of the engine bay. You can get that back panel out, and that valve cover comes in and out real easy. The torque and procedures, they're in the Bentley manual. It's real easy. 84 inch-pounds, crisscross pattern, start in the middle. Valvetronic motor goes back in the same way it came out. You screw it in. The only thing I got left to do now is install the coils, reroute the wiring harness. It's the same as removal. I'm not going to show all that. I'm not even going to show the finished product. So the main focus of this video was doing that Valvetronic eccentric shaft sensor and the valve cover in and off. The reason we had to do it on this, he previously had the valve cover seal replaced. I always recommend doing the whole valve cover. The reason I recommend doing the whole valve cover is once you buy a new Valvetronic eccentric shaft sensor seal, a new Valvetronic motor seal, and new bolts, because you're supposed to replace the bolts when you do these valve covers, you might as well have just bought the valve cover and not just the seal. That's one reason. The second reason, they crack a lot of times when we're trying to get them out because they're flexy. In the E90 chassis and the X chassis, there's not a lot of room to the firewall. We end up cracking them and twisting them to get them out. And then the third reason, which is the reason we had to do this one, is the PCV system goes bad, which coincidentally, when the PCV goes bad, the crankcase overpressurizes, it forces oil out the seal. So that's, anytime they're leaking so bad that we want to replace them, I recommend we do the whole cover, period. Can't tell you how many times I've had a customer say, just do the seal, and within 3 months they're back saying, you know, it's jacked up, replace the cover. Well, I told you so. That's it as far as this video goes. If you like this content, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon for future notifications. And as always, there's more to follow.